11 days after I buried my wife, I discovered I discovered that in my family's eyes, I was worth less than the coffin we'd just lowered into the ground. I understand why Eleanor didn't leave you a single penny. The man sitting across from me said that. Not the lawyer. Not a stranger. But my daughter's husband. A man barely in his 30s. He pointed his finger right at my face, in the middle of the solicitor's office. Then he smiled. You're just an old plumber. Never even finished school. If you had money, what would you do with it? Hide it under the mattress? The whole room went dead silent. The lawyer said nothing. My daughter said nothing. And me? I sat there in the black coat that still carried the scent of my wife's funeral flowers. And the most terrifying part was, a part of me started to believe he was right. Because when the lawyer finished reading the will, my name had vanished completely. No house. No savings. No keepsake. Not a single thing from 41 years of marriage. The woman I loved more than anything on this earth seemed to have left everything to other people. And in that moment, I felt like I'd lost my wife a second time. But what nobody in that room knew was that Eleanor never once left things to fate, and the woman who'd lived with me for 41 years most certainly had not forgotten me in the way they all believed. There was a secret hidden inside the letter the lawyer had just slid across the table. A secret that would wipe the smile right off my son-in-law's face. A secret that would make every person there that day wish they had treated me differently. My name is Walter Brennan, and I worked with my hands for 46 years in Salford, just across the river from Manchester. Boilers, pipes, radiators, the cold, cramped spaces under 1,000 kitchen sinks. I never finished school. I left at 15 to bring money home when my father's lungs gave out. And in all those decades I was never once ashamed of a hard day's work. Until that gray Thursday morning at the offices of Hartley and Crew, where my whole life got weighed on a scale and came back apparently worth nothing. Eleanor had been gone less than 2 weeks. 41 years of marriage, ended by an illness that took its time and took everything. Her reading glasses were still folded on the nightstand. I still caught the smell of her hand cream on my coat sleeve. I still heard her humming in rooms that were empty now. The grief sat on my chest like a wet sandbag. But I'd told myself the reading of her will would bring some small peace, some last word from her. I was so wrong about that. The office was all cold glass and gray carpet. Nothing like the warm, cluttered house we'd built together. The solicitor, a careful man named Mr. Okafor, shuffled papers behind a wide desk. My daughter, Caroline, sat to one side with her husband, Damien. She'd barely looked at me since the funeral. She was drowning in her own grief, with no air left to notice mine. I folded my thick, scarred hands in my lap and waited. I trusted whatever Eleanor had decided. She was always the clever one, the one who paid the bills, read the small print, knew how the world worked. I just brought the wages home every week and let her work the magic. Whatever she wanted was fine by me. Mr. Okafor began in that flat, careful voice solicitors use. To Caroline, her grandmother's jewelry, and the good china. Caroline nodded, eyes wet. To Damien, the holiday lodge up in the Lake District and everything in it. Damien leaned forward, and a small, satisfied smile crossed his face. Then came the line that turned the room over. The remainder of the estate, the house, and the modest savings, around £31,000 to Caroline Brennan Vasey. I waited for my name. It never came. Not the house. Not the savings. Not a photograph. Not a watch. Not a single object from 41 years of a shared life. Nothing. And before the silence could even settle into something I could understand, Damien moved. "Well," he said, leaning back, lacing his fingers behind his head. "That tells you everything, doesn't it?" Smart woman, Eleanor. She knew. Mr. Okafor cleared his throat and said there was a private note for me. He slid a small envelope across the desk, my name on it in Eleanor's careful, looping hand. I reached for it. Damien stood up first. "You know what, Walter? This is exactly right." He pointed, actually pointed, across the desk at me. "You're a plumber. A decent bloke, fine, but a man who never sat an exam in his life. What were you going to do with an inheritance? Keep it under the mattress?" Eleanor had sense. She left it to people who understand money. I felt the words land somewhere under my ribs. I need to stop here for a second because, honestly, my hands were in fists just remembering it. There is a specific kind of cruelty in kicking a man while he's grieving and dressing it up as common sense. If you've ever sat in a room while someone talked about you like you weren't even there, like you were a problem to be managed, then you already know exactly how cold that office felt. I knew it. I just didn't have the words. Damien wasn't finished. He turned to Mr. Okafor like I was a piece of furniture. 40 years of marriage, sure, but let's be honest, Eleanor was the brains. She ran the house. She handled everything. Walter just turned up with a pay packet and let her sort it. And fair play, she sorted it brilliantly. My hands started to tremble, not with anger, with something far worse, shame. The deep, drowning fear that the boy was telling the truth. And here's the thing I want you to sit with. I didn't argue, because every accusation contained a fact. Eleanor had handled the money. I had left school at 15. I had spent 40 years quietly feeling like a man who'd somehow married above himself. Damien wasn't inventing things. He was just twisting true facts into a knife. That's what made it unbearable. Caroline whispered, "Damien, that's enough." But there was no force in it. She looked at her own hands, and I, who had hoped my daughter would stand and defend me, felt that hope quietly die. The meeting ended fast after that. Papers signed, hands shaken, and then I was standing in the car park feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. Caroline touched my sleeve. "Dad, I'm sorry about Damien. He gets worked up about money." I nodded, not trusting my voice. She gave me a quick, dutiful hug and walked to Damien's gleaming car. I climbed into my old work van, the one with paint on the seats and tools rattling in the back, and drove home to a house that was apparently no longer mine. That envelope sat unopened on my kitchen table for 3 hours. I stared at it, terrified that her last words would confirm everything Damien had thrown at me. When I finally opened it, my hands shook. The note was short. "My dearest Walter, you were always my greatest treasure. Trust that I've sorted everything. All my love, always, Eleanor." I read it 20 times, searching for a hidden meaning, finding only her warmth and that strange line, "I've sorted everything." What did that mean? The house was unbearable that night. Every corner held her. The chair where she did the crossword, the window where she read her paperbacks while I watched the football. I couldn't face our bed. I slept in my armchair with the old photo albums open on my lap. Our wedding, 1982. Eleanor glowing in a simple dress, me terrified in a borrowed suit. Caroline as a baby. Holidays in Blackpool. Quiet Sunday mornings. And in every single picture, Eleanor was smiling at me, not past me, at me. She never once looked like a woman ashamed of the man beside her. But maybe, I thought, she'd just been kind enough to hide it. By morning I was hollowed out. The next day, needing to feel close to her, I started going through her things. Her jewelry box first. The modest engagement ring I'd saved 6 months to buy. The pearls from our 10th anniversary. Even the cheap drugstore earrings from our broke early years, she'd kept every single one. If she'd been embarrassed by a working man's gifts, she'd hidden it perfectly. Then her writing desk by the bedroom window. Everything organized, the way Eleanor organized the whole world. Bank letters, recipes, birthday cards. And at the back of the bottom drawer, behind the stationery, a small wooden box I had never seen before. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all in her handwriting. Not letters she'd received letters. She'd written, never sent. The first was dated 3 years ago. "I watched Walter mend the neighbor's fence today, without being asked, without a word. He has no idea how rare he is. 40 years married, and he still astonishes me with his goodness. Damien thinks a degree makes you clever. Walter has something better. He has the kind of wisdom you only earn by being kind." My chest caved in. I read on. Caroline's frustrated with her father again. Says he's too simple, no ambition. She doesn't understand that ambition isn't always about climbing. Walter's whole ambition, his entire life, has been to keep the people he loves safe and warm. Every early start, every emergency call out at 2 in the morning, every wage packet, all of it, love. There were more. Page after page. The time I worked 3 days without sleep to fix the heating when Caroline had pneumonia. How I'd quietly paid for the widow next door's shopping for a year after her husband died. How I'd held Eleanor through every round of treatment and never once made her feel like a burden. "People look at Walter and see just a plumber," she wrote in one. "I see a man who spent his whole life fixing things. He fixed our roof and our boiler. But more than that, he fixed my loneliness. He fixed my fear." He built us a life with nothing but his 2 hands and his heart. By now I was sobbing those great, ugly, shoulder-heaving sobs that men of my generation were taught to swallow. These were not the words of a disappointed woman. These were love letters to an entire marriage. And I'll be honest with you, sitting there on the bedroom floor, reading proof that I'd been treasured all along while a younger man's insults still rang in my ears. I had to stop. Because how many people go their whole lives never knowing they were loved like that? I almost did. One letter, 6 months old. Walter brought me flowers today, just because it's Tuesday. 3 quid of daisies from the corner shop, and he was so proud. Damien would call it cheap. He'll never understand that those daisies are 40 years of Tuesdays, of Saturday fry-ups, of goodnight kisses. Walter never made grand gestures. He just made small, perfect ones every single day. And the last, written 2 weeks before she died. I'm frightened of leaving him alone. Not because he can't manage, because he doesn't know how precious he is. The world tells men like my husband that they don't matter, that working with your hands makes you less. But Walter matters. He is the finest man I have ever known. I only hope that one day he'll see himself the way I have always seen him. I sat in the wreckage of 40 years, surrounded by her secret words, finally understanding. She hadn't been disappointed. She'd been protecting me, treasuring me, in ways I never knew. But that still didn't explain the will. If she felt all this, why leave me nothing? I was about to close the box when I saw it at the bottom. A small brass key, a number stamped into it 309, and a note. Safe deposit box, Northern Counties Bank, for Walter. When the time is right, my heart began to slam against my ribs. Trust that I've sorted everything. Maybe she had. I didn't sleep. By 6 the next morning I was parked outside the bank, the key burning in my pocket, the autumn cold seeping through the van windows. When the doors opened, I was first inside. A young clerk asked for identification, had me sign forms, my signature shaking, nothing like the steady scrawl I'd put on work orders for half a century. The box was registered to Eleanor Brennan, she said. Was I an authorized user? My stomach dropped. She was my wife, I said. She passed 2 weeks ago. The clerk's face softened. 20 minutes later, after a death certificate and a marriage certificate and a supervisor named Mr. Adeyemi, I was led into a small private room. Mrs. Brennan was a lovely woman, he said. Came in regularly. Always knew exactly what she wanted. Regularly? Oh yes. Once a month, easily, for 15 years or more. I stared at him. 15 years? The box was the size of a briefcase. Mr. Adeyemi turned his key beside mine and left me alone. I lifted the lid with both trembling hands. Inside dozens of files, each labeled in Eleanor's neat hand. Share certificates, investment statements, bonds. I pulled the first one and nearly dropped it. Utility shares, purchased 1,986. Current value, £41,000. I grabbed another. Pharmaceutical shares, 1,989. Current value, 98,000. File after file. Each original purchase, small 200 quid, 300, but the dates ran back decades. And at the bottom, a thick envelope. For Walter. Inside, a letter and account summaries from 3 separate firms. My dearest Walter, if you're reading this, you found my little secret. I hope you're not angry that I kept it all these years. I wasn't angry. I was stunned into stone. Do you remember handing me your wages every Friday? That proud smile. You never once asked for an account. You just trusted me, completely. That trust was the greatest gift anyone ever gave me. So I took a little from each packet, £20, 30. Nothing you'd miss, and I invested it. And Walter, I got good at it. I got very good. I looked at the summaries. Account 1, £512,000. Account 2, £840,000. Account 3, £690,000. I read the numbers 3 times before they made sense. Eleanor had turned 40 years of a plumber's wages into more than £2 million. £2 million, without me ever knowing, without ever cutting a single corner that I noticed. I was going to surprise you on our 45th anniversary, the letter went on. Make a great show of it. Show you that all your overtime, all those freezing early mornings, had grown into something beautiful. Then I got sick, and everything changed. And I realized this money was never really mine to leave in an ordinary will. It came from your hands. Your trust. Your Friday wages. It belongs to you, Walter. All of it. I set it up to come straight to you, outside the will, where no one could touch it. I didn't want Damien's hands anywhere near it. I've watched him look at you like you're less than him, and it has made me furious for years. He thinks wealth is about degrees and titles. He has no idea that the richest thing in any room has always been you. And here is where my whole understanding of that morning turned over. Because Eleanor hadn't just hidden a fortune. She'd built a trap. She'd left me out of the will on purpose to make Damien show the whole world exactly who he was before the truth came out. She knew. She knew her son-in-law would humiliate a grieving man the second he thought there was nothing to gain. And she let him do it. So that when the truth landed, no one could ever pretend it hadn't. The phone rang in my pocket. Damien's name. Something made me answer. Walter, where are you? Caroline said you were meant to start clearing the house. I'm at the bank, I said quietly. The bank? Why? You're not trying to contest the will, are you? Don't embarrass yourself. I almost laughed. No, I'm not contesting anything. Good. Look, Caroline feels bad. We want to help you find a little flat. One of those nice retirement places, no maintenance, nothing to worry about. The condescension was breathtaking. Here I was, sitting in a vault on top of £2 million, being offered a charity bedsit. That's very kind, Damien. It's the decent thing. Eleanor would want us looking after you. And listen, emotional decisions about money never end well. She was wise to leave the real assets to people who understand finance. I looked down at the statements in my hand. Actually, Damien, I thought, I think I'll manage my own affairs. And for the first time in days, my voice came out steady. I think I can sort out my own arrangements. Now, I want to be fair to Damien here, because the easy thing is to make him a cartoon. Damien genuinely believed what he was saying. In his world, worth really is measured in qualifications and portfolios. It's how he'd built his entire sense of himself. When he looked at me, he wasn't seeing a man he hated. He was seeing a category unskilled, sentimental, someone to be managed. He even thought he was being responsible. That's what made him dangerous. Not malice. Certainty. The total, comfortable certainty that he was the cleverest man in every room he walked into. That evening, Damien came round uninvited, sat at Eleanor's kitchen table, and spread out a folder like a barrister presenting a case. He'd done sums. My pension, the state pension, maybe $1,400 a month. Council tax, bills, repairs. It's just arithmetic, Walter. Sell the house, clear about $40,000, top up your pension by a couple of hundred a month. It won't be glamorous, but it's realistic. He sat back, pleased with himself. I looked at this man who had just planned out the rest of my life using numbers that were a rounding error next to the truth. There's one thing, I said carefully. I found some papers of Eleanor's. Investment papers. I want a professional to look them over. Damien's whole body changed. Investment papers? I could look at those. I handle all our accounts. No, I'd rather have someone independent. His jaw tightened. Walter, if there are undisclosed assets, they'd form part of the estate. Caroline would need to know. Of course, I said mildly. Once I understand them. We looked at each other across the table, and for the first time in years, I was not the smaller man in the conversation. He felt it. His eyes narrowed. He didn't know what had shifted, but something had. The second meeting at Hartley & Crew was a different world. I wasn't a broken widower clutching an envelope anymore. I'd spent the night reading the work of the most brilliant person I'd ever known, and I finally understood her. This time I didn't come alone. Beside me sat Mrs. Patricia Vaughn, the financial advisor who'd quietly managed Eleanor's portfolio for over a decade. When I'd rung her office, her assistant had known my name at once. Mr. Brennan, Mrs. Vaughn had said when we met. Your wife spoke of you constantly. She used to say you were the most honest man she had ever known. Damien arrived on time, briefcase in hand, that satisfied look already in place. Caroline looked exhausted, worn thin. Walter, he said, settling in, I hope you've brought those documents. We spent half the night on the tax implications. Mr. Okafor cleared his throat. Actually, Mr. Vasey, I've asked Mrs. Vaughn to join us. She advised Mrs. Brennan and can explain things better than I can. Damien's eyebrows shot up. Advised her? Eleanor had a financial advisor? Now slow down with me here, because this is the moment the whole story has been walking toward. Mrs. Vaughn opened her case with the calm of a woman who'd done this 1,000 times. She laid out a single folder. She didn't rush. The clock on the wall ticked. Caroline shifted in her seat. Damien leaned forward, and I could see it in his face, that hunger, that scent of money, the gears already turning behind his eyes. Mrs. Brennan, she said, was one of the most disciplined investors I have ever worked with. She began with us in the mid-90s and built a remarkable portfolio over many years. How remarkable? Damien asked, and he actually wet his lips. A few thousand? 10? Mrs. Vaughn glanced at her notes. The room held its breath. The total portfolio, she said, is currently valued at approximately £2.1 million. Nobody breathed. Damien's mouth fell open. Actually fell open. Caroline made a small sound, like the air had been knocked out of her. Mr. Okafor kept writing, unsurprised he'd known all along. And I watched my son-in-law's face do something I will remember for the rest of my life. That's impossible, Damien finally managed. Eleanor was a housewife. He's a plumber. Where would that come from? Mrs. Vaughn's voice cooled by several degrees. From nearly 40 years of small, consistent investments, made with exceptional skill. She took modest amounts from the household budget and grew them through patience and compound interest. From what household budget? Damien snapped. He barely earned enough to feed a family. And that's when I spoke, quiet and level. I earned enough, Damien. Eleanor made it work. Caroline turned to me, eyes huge. 2 million? Dad, how is that even possible? Mrs. Vaughn answered for me, and I want you to hear this line, because it's the whole story in one breath. Your mother understood something most people never do. Wealth isn't about how much you earn. It's about what you do with it. Mr. Brennan provided 40 years of steady income. Mrs. Brennan turned it into security. Damien was scribbling frantically now. Right, this changes the estate completely. Caroline, as primary beneficiary, will need to restructure. No, Mr. Okafor said gently. The investment accounts don't form part of the estate. They have named beneficiaries that override the will. Mrs. Brennan arranged it years ago. Damien's head snapped up. And the beneficiary is? Though by now you could see he already knew. Mr. Walter Brennan, Mrs. Vaughn said. Sole beneficiary of all investment accounts and policies. Damien exploded out of his chair. That's absurd. He doesn't understand basic banking. She was confused, or Mr. Vasey. Mrs. Vaughn's voice was ice. Mrs. Brennan reviewed and confirmed these designations every single year. She was neither confused nor mistaken. Her instructions were extremely specific. Then she drew out one final envelope. She left this, to be read aloud, in her words, if anyone challenged the arrangements. She passed it to me. I opened it with steady hands, and in a room gone completely silent, I read out my wife's last argument to the world. If you're hearing this, someone has questioned my decision to leave everything to Walter. Let me be perfectly clear. Every pound in those accounts came from his labor. He handed me his wages every Friday for 40 years, and never once asked for an account. He earned that money with his hands and his sweat. The fact that I grew, it changes nothing about where it came from. I glanced up. Damien was staring at the table. Damien has often remarked on Walter's lack of education, as though a certificate decides a person's worth. What Damien has never understood is that Walter has something no university grants: character, loyalty, and the kind of quiet integrity that builds real wealth over a lifetime. Caroline was crying now, openly. Caroline, you have the house and the memories, because that is your inheritance, the place you grew up. The money is security, and it belongs to the man who made it possible. Walter never once asked for thanks. If anyone on this earth has earned the right to rest easy, it is him. And then, pure Eleanor, Damien, if you're thinking of contesting this, I chose an advisor with 40 years' experience in estate law. It is all watertight. Save yourself the legal fees. When I finished, the office was silent. Caroline wept quietly. Damien looked like a man who'd been struck, and for the first time since I'd known him, he had absolutely nothing to say. This whole thing taught me something I keep turning over. The mistake most people make, and Damien made it in front of everyone, is believing that the people who speak the loudest about worth are the ones who actually understand it. What Eleanor understood, that no one else in that room did, was that the truest wealth a person builds is never in an account. It's in how they treat people when there's nothing to gain. I handed over my wages for 40 years and asked for nothing. Damien calculated and measured, and was certain, and ended up the poorest man in the room. So here's the one thing I'd ask you to do today, even if it's small. Think of the quiet person in your life. The one who fixes things, shows up, never asks for credit. Tell them you see them. Don't wait for a will to do it. And the question I'll leave you sitting with is this: when people look at the ones you love, do they see a job title? Or do they see the whole person? 6 months on, Damien turned up at my door, tie straight, pride swallowed, and apologized. Caroline was expecting a baby. The family began to mend slowly, honestly, the way real things do. I never moved. Same house, same van, same work clothes. The money didn't change my days, it changed my nights. The fear of being a burden, gone. I quietly paid a neighbor's child's university fees. I covered a widow's medical bills and never said a word. And on autumn evenings I'd sit on the back step with a glass of wine, under the oak Eleanor and I had planted on our 5th anniversary, and feel her there. "Thank you," I'd whisper. And the wind in the gold leaves seemed to answer, the way she always had. "You earned it, Walter. Every penny. Every moment of peace. You earned all of it. So tell me what you think of how I handled it. If you'd have done exactly what I did, stayed calm, said nothing, let the truth do the work, comment a 1. If you think I should have spoken up and defended myself in that first meeting, comment a 2. And if you believe Eleanor was the real genius of this whole story, comment a 3. I genuinely read these. And while you're down there, tell me which city you're watching from and what time it is where you are right now, because it amazes me how far these stories travel. Have you ever been in a room where someone looked straight through you, like you weren't even there? Tell me. I read every single one. If this story moved you even a little, do me a small kindness and subscribe. It's just you and me here, and every quiet person who hits that button helps me find the next story worth telling. I'll see you in the next one. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences, fully rewritten and reimagined in Manchester to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or events is coincidental. You said, "Hi viet lai hook marn hun, jart gun hun."